I think you'd agree it's not just coaching that, you would use as a definition of what you're doing now. It's you're a father, you're a husband.
Yeah, in more recent time, it has been continuously educating myself on what it is coaching and how to best implement it. And what it's helped me do is evolve from what I thought was an understanding of coaching, skill, and physical movement to being a leader and how to like implement that further in a classroom setting and in life, essentially, right? Because it all hopefully will bleed outside of like that one structured hour and into being like as peaceful as possible, even if that's with your neighbor whose dog is barks all the time,
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Stuff like that,
Today I'm going to be speaking with Juvi Gonzalez. Juvie is someone that I've been lucky enough to be coached by, and so as this project has been kind of really gaining steam, I immediately thought of Juvie as one of the great quiet leaders that I've been lucky enough to know. And there's some important topics that sometimes are kind of taboo in terms of media, but here they are not. So I really appreciate everyone's support, and I hope you enjoy the show. So Juvie Gonzalez, thank you so much for coming to this episode of the Quiet Leaders Podcast. You're someone I greatly admire, and I've been a student of yours. You've been my CrossFit coach for quite some time, and I know you've been just had such an interesting sort of life story that I think we'll dig into. But how would you describe yourself today?
Blessed, for sure. I am been coaching right now for 14 years as a fitness instructor, father of two. I've been married for 15, 16 years now, with my wife for 22 years. And I live in LA. Like, it's an amazing space to be in. I'm from New York, but I get to still have that community now that I've been here for some time. And so, I'm living a pretty good life. I'm fortunate all around. Things aren't perfect, but I think that's part of having a good life, is that things aren't perfect. Yeah, I get to be around folks every single day who are seeking growth or don't even know that they are, and that's where like rubber meets the road quite often as a coach, and I really look forward to it. I'm an early riser. I teach like 5 a.m. classes.
Wow.
And I go all the way, at times, all the way to 8 p.m. Depends on the day, but it'll be from classes to private with clients. And each time it's just an exchange of energy. It's an exchange of hopefully what is growth. It's very rarely ever been detrimental in terms of that, hour or two, whatever we spend together. But the diversity of people I get to work with, from work background to cultural background, and even in the city of LA has been quite the adventure so far. I'm talking about like Hidden Hills to Long Beach, West LA, and different parts of town, Burbank, stuff like that. And so it's been fun. It's been an interesting voyage so far in LA.
I love that, and I think a recent conversation with our mutual friend and your former colleague, Brian Ugali, sort of surfaced an idea he had that I think is meaningful, and I'd be curious what you think of it, which is that the coaching title is something that has to be earned, right? Looking at the board and saying the workout is not coaching.
No, not at all. I love Brian, by the way.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy.
We've had a lot to definitely meet and have a experience together, and it's been quite the journey. But yes, I agree with him. As far as receiving it, you can go to a weekend seminar and then come out and have a title of a coach, a t-shirt or whatever it is. But actually coaching, when rubber hits the road, means having a lot of patience. I look at it even under the scope, it sounds silly, but of actually trying to love people, which if you're not a people person, that is really rough to go about. But when you want to connect with people, you can see that, we're all imperfect, and it becomes about connection versus perfection, right? Yes, not even versus. It's about connection over all the imperfections that people have, and you're just trying to massage one another in a direction that's better than where you're at.
So I want to learn about what brought you to California, but before we do, I want to know more about your upbringing in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the 80s and 90s. I was born in 81. And so Williamsburg, Brooklyn, big up. Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I when I throw myself back there, it it was a special moment in that it's probably Brooklyn in the 80s and 90s was not where people wanted to go. It wasn't a tourist area, to say the least. It's roughneck, drugs, alcohol, violence. Thinking about my neighborhood, it was run down, and you know, I as critical as I'm gonna be about it right now, I just know that it's all love. And in looking back at it, I learned a lot from being in that environment. I had a lot of homeless people, drug addicts, drug dealers in my neighborhood, in my building, as neighbors, thieves. But thinking back at it, like it was within range of like I live here, so you guys are putting me in danger, but you also my neighborhood, you're also my community. So it's a interesting relationship to be like Eddie the drug dealer is also like my homie who watches out for me because he knows that I'm not part of this.
Yeah.
So there's this like symbiotic experience where you're like, well, you're part of the neighborhood, and at some point you're based off of gossip that I can remember, the ladies in the neighborhood were like, well, that boy's gonna grow up to be a young dad who either goes to jail or dies, right? And that's like kind of the set expectation you get, or I've got when I was growing up in Brooklyn. It's like, this is where you're gonna land,
right?
Off of all that's happening. A neighborhood, consists of Puerto Rican. You had Jamaicans, you had Chinese folk, you had Polish folk. I think it was very diverse, quite honestly. Depending on the neighborhood you're walking through, and you had to watch out what neighborhood you were walking through because everyone was like, "This is our neighborhood." So, you're a Chinese deliverer, you're trying to deliver Chinese food. You're getting jacked by the Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans walking into the Polish neighborhood. You're getting jumped by Polish folks. Like everyone's so territorial. And that's that's how it was, right? And so growing up in Brooklyn was I grew up Catholic, so that's a big part of my journey in Brooklyn. Most Holy Trinity was the church that I attended and went through the whole Catholic experience. And even like joined the youth center there. A lot of that experience definitely held me tightly away from joining any gang affiliations or any other kind of activity like that, which is readily available, right? Because it was just, they're my friends, right? I grew up preschool with these kids, elementary school, like they're just a part of the neighborhood, right? And I grew up, I kind of mentioned my brother. I have an older brother, Lewis, and he's 7 years older than me. So he's always been like a kind of like an angel because he's been ahead of me. He was like, this is my brother. Don't fuck with him, essentially, right? And so I think that helped a lot because he took a lot of the forefront of what I didn't have to face as a younger brother. Like he was just there for me. So he, in many cases, doesn't even tell me the stories of what he had to struggle through, being my older brother, and then just like making sure that I was taken care of, even though we didn't really build a relationship until like I was a little bit older, into my 20s.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think that's the definition of a great older brother. I'm an older brother, but I don't know that. Hopefully, my younger
you
brother.
You probably took more of a grunt than your
what's that
younger sibling understands.
Well, as time has gone on, I had 1 year of overlap in high school where we went to the same high school. I looked out for him as best I could and whatnot, but it's certainly what you're talking about is a very different dynamic altogether. It might have been dangerous.
In various occasions, not only did I have friends who were affiliated in gangs point guns at me. Unfortunately, knock on wood, I was just saved by some luck. But like the affiliation is real, from friends who were affiliated to like police officers who were even if they were just dicking around, it was just like my life, pointing guns at me or just like, just not being justified, essentially, right? In one of the cases I can remember, I'll jump into this story
please,
here. Is I was, I don't know, maybe 14 or so, maybe 16. I was supposed to be going to church, actually, to the church youth group. But I skipped out and ended up heading out to Queens Center Mall and hanging out, just checking out the girls, quite honestly, with all the homies. And after just being at the mall for a little while, we were going to head back to Brooklyn. And as we were going down to this train station, we were going down the staircase, I can remember, and like this white guy comes out of nowhere, and he's just like, "Hey, you motherfuckers, you fucking motherfuckers," and like he's pointing a gun. And what caught me off guard there, I guess, thinking back now, is that we started laughing. We were like, "Who is this fucking white guy, pointing this gun at us?" And he was like dead serious, and he had like it was a legit weapon, right? He was an undercover cop. Now that I could think about it, so I'll give that to you guys. And he put us against the wall. He frisked us, but I was the shortest one, and maybe I was the one who looked probably the most to what I'm about to tell you. And he like handcuffs me, drags me up the staircase, has me kneeling on a train station. There's people fucking walking around, and he has all of us kneel, but he's like, I guess, really mad at me for whatever reason. And he says, "Yo, you spit," and he spits on my face. And there's another officer with him, and she's like, "You're absolutely like not supposed to be doing this, in public, in front of this like train station." And I'm like, at that point, really nervous because he's like, he still has his gun out in public, and like threatening me, And it's just one of those stories that you can probably easily hear, like, kid dies, not the suspect, So.
Right.
When it comes to like we're kneeling on the ground and these other teenagers are pretty much brought to in front of us, and they're kind of like, it's like being profiled essentially in real time right then and there in the train station. And then they just nod their heads like, "No, that's not the guys," right? But little did I know, like in that moment, that the guy was like, "You fucking are so lucky," right? He's telling me this, but the guy who was profiling us, the kids or teenagers, was his son. So it was just like the cop was the father of this guy.
Wow.
Who got his beeper. This is a very timely story. He got his beeper stolen at the time, and so I must have matched the description, which I think played a very big role growing up in Brooklyn. That quite often I would match the description. Junior high school happened the same way. And across like my time span in Brooklyn, that would always be a sentence I would hear from officers: "You match the description." I mean, I must have looked like a whole lot of other Puerto Ricans at that time, But the takeaway there, as I walked away from that scene and we rode the train back, there's so much hatred in my heart, like for the world, for police, obviously. It was at the time of Giuliani, so like I just hated Giuliani. I was just like, what the fuck? Is like, all I'm trying to do is be a kid, And
in that case, go to church.
Right.
Or you should have been at church, I suppose, but you were definitely not in the mix of some of the things that would have otherwise been,
right.
Let's call it probable cause or whatever they claim for people to have.
And, that was one, like probably one of the closest times that I could have died. It could have been really simple. Like I thought actually he would have shot me just off of laughter because I was like maybe just nervous, and I didn't notice that the situation was like of beef in that way that I would otherwise have recognized it. But I was like, is this white guy with a gun? Like, what he's gonna do with that thing? Little did I know it was a cop who was infuriated. But moving away from that time frame, I can remember taking the train with my friends and just really hating. I'm so confused. I hated myself. I hated the world. Like I just all hate in terms of understanding what the world was. At that point, I pretty much broke ground in terms of like I hate the police because of this one instance, right? Like you can't trust them. Like they already weren't trustworthy to that point, and this just added icing on the cake. So then, fast forward, it took me a while. This was probably in the beginning of high school or something like that. But by the end of high school, it had taken me a while to reflect on it. But I came across applying for college And in reflection to my application for college, I wrote about this. But I came to a conclusion that I just wanted to forgive and forget this whole incident. Not so much to tuck it under the rug, but to truly be like, you know what? Like, I think about it. I didn't grow up with my father, but I thought about it from the shoes of the officer and being like the situation made sense. Like, you are mad. I'm a dad now, you know, and someone tells me a story about my son getting whatever, jumped, hurt in some way. You're immediately at the defense. And so it took me a while, but like as a, you know, almost into my 20s, like as a late teen kid, I was just like, you know what? Like, I don't want to live like this in this hatred for the rest of my life. You know, I was definitely hurt. I was definitely scared. And the compounding of like so many officers' experiences in a similar way over time really built that hatred. But that experience stood out for me most because I had to make a decision within myself. Otherwise, I'm just carrying this. Nobody else knows about this, nor probably even cares. And so I decided to be forgiven, and I was just like, I'm really gonna forgive this guy. Like, I could think back to that story now and not have hatred about it. Although it is touching because it's another version of me that had to like kind of pass away in order to like rejuvenate the person I am today. You know, and so the idea behind that is that I try to apply that story to many other stories in my life when I'm meeting people, you know, like they're in hurt of something and need to transition into something else. And I'm kind of exasperating. I'm making it a bigger picture, but like moving into my coaching component in life, like people come with hurt. They don't say it like that. They're like, I had a divorce. Like, that's hurt for sure. But they're like, I got 10 pounds on me. I'm trying to lose 10 pounds. But it's like, okay, why? Like, why? I'm trying to look good for the beach. Okay, cool. But why? Who cares?
Ask why 5 times.
You know? Exactly. You get a little bit deeper. And you're just like, it's not really about the bikini. It's not maybe even about the audience you're trying to draw. But it's like something much deeper. Maybe a pain that is not being released in another way or channeled another way. That this format, fitness or being coached in some way, is going to liberate that. So the surfacey portion of that in modern time with me is just like, cool, let's go work out. But the depth of it goes way beyond that. And as a coach right now, like I try to channel that version of me, specifically the forgiving component, into my line of work and speaking with people as people who hurt, quite honestly. And we get to speak about it. Do we get solutions out of it? Many times we actually do, because awareness is just one. Like, you don't even know that you're aching in this way. And then like trying to find real life solutions that start with the low hanging fruit. Sometimes it's talking to that person, texting that person, or letting go. Today I've been going through, I have like this mantra I guess I use, which is create, give, and let go. So I try to create a experience for people. I try to give them my very best in whatever knowledge or experience I can, and then I let go of it. Like, it wasn't even mine to begin with. And as a coach, I think that my past self from Brooklyn to this point has grown through that experience. It's just like, that experience was given to me. I didn't want it back in Brooklyn, but like I'm now making the most out of it in a positive way, and then I want to give it to other folks. You know, I hope that was a long.
Yeah, no,
answer.
that was a.
'Cause I journaled about it back then. I actually wrote in my journal as a high schooler, and so I can go to date and be like,
Wow.
oh, this was the day. I have my journals from back then.
Wow.
This is when it happened. This is where it happened. I'm sure I could like backtrack it and be like, and find this guy.
You know his name?
You know. I don't know. I probably wrote it on in my journal because I was just like, okay, details. I got to do a complaint. Oh, so I'm so mad.
You keep those journals?
But yeah, I have them. I have them right now here.
I
in
keep
LA.
mine too, from all the way back as when I first started doing that. And
that would be a really interesting experience.
No, honestly, might. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I don't know from his perspective. I can imagine like if that happened. Like,
well, you know what? Like
20 years later, you meet the guy. He's like, I don't know. I kicked a lot of Puerto Ricans' ass.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, look, I I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's on so many levels such an important thing to share. Not just the impact it had on you personally, the trauma that came from that, the fact that it manifests itself in anger, which is not unexpected in any way, that many people might go in a certain direction that totally changes the trajectory of their life.
Yeah,
that
easily.
May well change. Like, say they have kids, and that, you know, the kids, so like it reverberates like throwing a stone in a pond.
That's real.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm glad you're highlighting that, because like having my kids grow up here in LA, like I don't even tell them that story until maybe up to current day. Now they're 11 and 9, and seeing officers on the street, I'm like, hey, say hello. You know, like I don't speak badly. I don't want to set a precedence for them of something that happened to me. You know, I try not to do that. I try to give them their own experience, their actual own experience, when it comes to things like that. And that's hard, because I have my own opinion based off of that, right? But at the same time, like, what am I giving them, and what am I gonna let go of? Like, do I really want them walking around stereotyping in a way that Daddy had implemented that in their mind? So yeah, to your point, it's like I don't want the ripples in the pond to shape themselves in that direction. You know, Juvie leaving from Brooklyn and going to Wheaton College, for example,
right.
you're like, you stand out like a sore thumb, and it's just, and you sound like it, and you look like it, and you walk like it, and you smell like it, and you don't eat like us, and but you're like trying to somehow feel like as though you're progressing or representing your hood in a positive way, but the world don't see you like that. At least like that is literally what I could speak to, and that people are like, yo, you hazardous in who you are, even though you don't mean to be that. Like, you grow up in this space and you're constantly looking over your back. You speak in a certain way because that's how we all speak to one another, whether it's straightforward, as some people say it, or it's just like loud or whatever you may think. It's like, that's literally our daily interaction. And outside of, let's say, that bubble, you are seen as this hazard, essentially. It's like, to some culture that you can contrast against, I guess. And it's really interesting that, you know, we as advocates, let's say if someone who wants to come from the outside and say, yeah, I want to support you, people who are in those neighborhoods, like myself coming up from Williamsburg, are like, we don't need your help. Like, this is how we live. You know what I mean? Like, what are you helping me be? More like you? Like, why would I need that?
Right.
So it's interesting that you say that, and that. Now, coming to LA, actually, like, most of my starting career wasn't as a coach. It wasn't in fitness at all. I worked in nonprofits, and the nonprofits I worked with, one that stands out. One, I worked for a scholarship organization called the Posse Foundation, identifying leaders in high school and granting them leadership merit-based scholarships to get them to college, right? So you want them to have good grades, but that's not like the criteria. It's like, what is your mission? I'm trying to change the world, like, in a leadership fashion. So that was like one of my jobs, and being able to work with youth, inner city, as we say it, right? And seeing that, like, they're walking their sister to school because mom has to go to work and there's no dad present, is a form of leadership that is developed, because, like, you're taking care of yourself, you're trying to get your grades, but you're also, like, parenting at the same time, and you're probably going to work right after that, you know, after school and things like that. So, like, those are forms of leadership that sometimes get overlooked. And I remember working with that nonprofit organization, I trying to identify who these youth were in the most oddest of ways, you know, trying to bring them together, and then trying to see who's going to be a leader, essentially, in a college setting. Another spot that I got to work with was the Urban League, which was in Crenshaw, which I would say was almost like the equivalent to Brooklyn of LA in a way. And fortunately, I got to work with a lot of the black students who are interesting in this coast. The interaction between Latinos and blacks are different from, I would say, the brotherhood from blacks and Latinos in Brooklyn. But I come with it the same way, regardless, anywhere I'm at. And so I was embraced by the youth I got to work with in Crenshaw. But it was interesting that they had seen me as someone a little bit different than what I saw myself as. And so I was like, nah, like I'm not Mexican. I'm Puerto Rican. They didn't even know what that was. Like, so you're like a black Latino guy? And so it was interesting to come across that experience here in LA, because it in a way broke barriers of like, of this confusion of like Latinos and blacks uniting on this coast a little bit more, based off of, I know, many historical conflicts happening there, but like being able to work in that community and say, listen, like we can actually be one and like develop our communities. Like, let's get jobs, let's continue school, don't drop out of school. Like, why would I even a East Coaster care about that in your community? Because it's universal, right? We all want to move forward in some way. And so I remember working with that nonprofit, and we broke some real good ground in some just some creative ways, you know, being able to have folks have a real Christmas, or have youth get to actually go on field trips, or have youth find employment where by any other means they probably just would have stuck to the streets, you know. So that was like a portion of my lifetime here in LA, being able to work in the nonprofit sector. Now as a father, I speak to that, and I try to be with my kids as often as possible. I was at the soccer game today. I was like, even if I could just be there an hour for the game and travel here, it was worth it, because my son got to see that I was there for his game.
Love that.
You know, and like when you lack it, you kind of appreciate it a little bit more, and maybe even overcompensate in that you're like, you know, I'm just going to be here and fulfill stuff that I wish I would have fulfilled, but not so much selfishly for myself, but like for you, like I'm going to be here for you. You know, like I never sat on my father's lap. As a matter of fact, this summer, I've got to be with my dad on my birthday. It's in July, and this is super funny, but I don't know if this will make the cut, but he spelled my name wrong on the cake. Right?
Unbelievable.
And my kids.
Do you have a picture of it?
No, I do actually.
We'll hook it up in the show notes. That's insane.
My kids noticed it. They 9/11, so they were like, "Daddy," I was like,
Oh, wow.
Like, let the moment be. I was like, don't correct them. He was like, but Daddy, that's like, how you spell your name? And I was like, no, like it's fine. Like the fact that we are even here is a really big deal, and I had to express that to them later on. But I was like, don't correct him. Like he's trying. He's like gave my kids a whole bunch of candy. I'm a fitness instructor. Like they don't really eat all that stuff. You know, I'm teaching them healthy habits and stuff. And so he's just doing everything that a grandfather can be, since he hadn't met my children until now. So 11 and 10.
Wow.
They never met their grandfather until my birthday of last year. And so it's interesting that you're saying that the lack of father, like he's just at that moment trying to be my dad at 42, you know? Like the one moment he's giving me a cake, like that was the first time I ever got a cake from him.
Wow.
I was celebrating my birthday with him. Was that day last year. And it's super interesting that the kids are correcting him on his spelling.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm just also like, you got to see the bigger picture. Like those little mistakes don't really mean anything. Like it doesn't matter. It didn't mean anything to me. And it shouldn't mean anything to you. Like you're going to get to at least touch the hand of a different generation before me. And like just have that in your memory. And like that's a big deal, you know?
I feel like at every story you tell, I'm going to have to kind of give you, again, I don't know if kudos doesn't seem significant enough, but there's a real respect for that kind of mindset that just like as you said, they might not fully understand why you're asking them to not, or like basically asking them, because I know the way you are, you're not forcing them, you're probably coaching them in some way to trust you, to respect you, of course, but to also not get sucked down, that path of, focusing on something that, as you said, wasn't really the most important point of that get together, which I think is super wise, and like just for you to be present and aware enough to do that, rather than, I can imagine any number of families that could have been a major issue, right? Like it could have been.
Like you got this grown ass man, and you're not spelling his name right. Like you get my mailing, don't you? Like, I mean, there's so many ways to have approached that, right? But it's like, no, like it was insignificant. But yeah, to your point, that stuff bleeds into, bringing it back to my chance to have been working with you, as a member in the gym. And I take my job like seriously as a coach, being able to take those experiences and say, okay, I know you don't know what you might be doing. You have a goal in mind in your fitness, but it goes a lot deeper, and it's a gateway to getting deeper, like, okay, you come in, you're doing this thing called CrossFit or whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. It could be yoga, it could be Orange Theory. The coach's role, I think, is if taken serious, can be an advocate for the individual, being able to not outsmart them because you're like trying to meet them in where they're at, but really have curiosity of an individual and being able to then have them evolve of themselves is like the biggest thing, right? I mean, being a parent is a great example of that. When you see your kid like about to do something that you don't recommend, and you're like, but they have to go through that experience in order to like understand, and like that, and I say this with all blessings, but you get to be a parent. If you get to be a parent, like you understand that when you're like in your heart, like not breathing because you're like, oh my God, I have to like let you do this. I have to let you like, I don't know, my son
Stump
one
your
day.
foot or break,
stump your foot. My son one day was like, Daddy, look at me. He puts his t-shirt over his face and runs right into the wall.
Oh,
and I was
God.
Like, what did I just see?
Yeah, I won't do that again, I don't think.
But it was like a worthy value. He actually did that recently too. I'm like, didn't you learn like 6 years ago when you did it at 3?
Right.
He does it again at 9.
He's so sweet. He used to bring him to the gym on occasion. He was just so sweet.
Oh, that's right. They grew up in the gym. That's right.
He would just like do it, play or do his thing or like, jump on the boxes and stuff. Like, he was just so sweet.
Yeah.
Your daughter as well. We're going to move on from New York and bring us to California. So what brought you out here, and what has your journey been like since you've been here?
For sure. So my wife, that's like the punchline. My wife brought me out here. This is 04, so I've been here 20 years this year. And so yeah, I met my wife studying abroad in college, and she was born and raised here, and then she was returned after college to LA, and after college I went back to New York for a short time, literally like short time, like 2 months, and I found my first job because I wanted to come and just be with my wife and keep our relationship, and little did I know that I would be here for this long, for 20 years. What am I trying to say? So yeah, I work with the nonprofit sector for the good amount of 2000 to 2010, and then I started coaching fitness in 2011. And what brought me out there was, besides my wife, was just like, okay, there's all this opportunity out here in LA for me to do, maybe even reinvent myself. Yeah. Right. So I guess a connection to my life story is that coming from Brooklyn, you find a lot of ways to hustle and really trying to survive in a way. You're in survival mode, and moving away from Brooklyn, you see that your passion, your character can be appreciated in a different way, in a different coast, and that's like what California. I experienced here. Yeah. People were like very excited to know that I'm from Brooklyn, and like even open to learning about it.
Yeah, totally.
And so that was a different interaction than I expected or even would imagine. And so the opportunities to work presented themselves. Also, just hustling. The East Coast hustle and the West Coast definitely pays off, because you just like the New York minute, living in the LA hour, essentially. When you think about 4 or 5.
People start work at 10. And
it's very slow motion for you here, but in the East Coast, it's very fast. And so, like you fast forward to 2011 when I started coaching. I just took all of that experience from my nonprofit work and from just life experience, and it's like channeled it into being able to work with people and wanting to be that change. Super quirky, be the change you want to see. But
I have that written on my whiteboard in my office, and
it's real.
I wrote it 2 months ago, the beginning, like after the new year, and I started thinking about it. Sorry to interrupt you, by the way, but I just want to add to this because it's important. I wrote it down. Everyone's probably heard that quote, Mahatma Gandhi, right? And so it's easy to kind of be one of those things that gets kind of thrown around. You don't really think about it that much, but
Yeah, it's hard.
that very quote is the reason why I reached out to probably the one person in my life that was the relationship fell apart. That was important. That was at one point an important relationship, a business relationship, but that a number of things happened that were unfortunate, and that there had been 4 years since I'd reached out. And then I just, without telling my wife even, I sent him a text and I said, it's time we break bread.
Yeah.
You know, and then he said he had been wanting to reach out, and you know, was
sure.
we had a nice meeting, and the point was, the reason why I'm saying this is that I realized because I coach people going through partnership issues a lot in business, but also in life. It could be any number of relationships can at some point be difficult. And so I was like, if I'm going to be a good coach, like an authentic coach, which I want to be just as you are, I got to clean out my skeletons too. You know, like you really have to do that, because otherwise, because now I can say this kind of thing and it's all true. It's just true. And then if you lead with, you know, that, like, everyone knows when a teacher, coach, person, boss of some sort is not walking the talk that they're espousing. And I think that is not at all what I want it to be. So I think that was a big lesson for me, actually, in many ways, because I didn't want to have that moment where you are in the shower and 1 minute a day or something, you think about the thing. So I thought it was about time to do that. So tying this whole conversation together, how do you think the people listening, the people, like in my case, I'm extremely privileged to even be having this conversation, to get to talk to someone like you that's just such an amazing person and coach and father and husband and all this, which is so terrific. And yet you have a lot of story and a message that I think will maybe motivate people to help and to contribute and to lean in, instead of, you know, going like this, because like, we can't do that anymore as a society. It doesn't work. So I would love to know what you think would be the kind of the call to action that you would love to sort of express.
Yeah, you know what? I think that immediately, I think that people need to have this face-to-face interaction, like not a Zoom, not a text, not even a call. Call will be good and you're like far away. That's okay. But literally a sit down with someone else that they haven't in a while, like it just keeps the integrity of who you are true. No BS, you know. There's books like What Everybody Is Saying. It's a book that speaks to the body language in which other people are really speaking to you about their real life about outside of what they're saying. And it just speaks to humanity, quite honestly. It's super like hippie, you know. But the idea is that we're getting a lot of disconnection from one another because we're finding every other route to try to communicate. But it's just this. Like, it's actually quite simple, but not easy, as most like workouts that you and I have done together. It's really a layout of like, oh, you're going to do this, this, and this. But like in action, being able to hold people accountable and like call them out respectfully is a really hard thing, but you have to build rapport. And the way you build rapport is with the first interaction, you know, whether it's shaking the hand or is being sincere about saying hello to them and not being robotic.
And knowing that you care and you're willing to hear someone, as well as maybe, you know, take someone up on the opportunity to share what's on your mind,
yeah,
your
that's
heart,
real.
or whatever.
Yeah, like that's one thing. Okay, one easy way to move the conversation forward in this action, I want everyone to practice and actually do right now if they get a chance, will be to text someone, because that's like the lowest hanging fruit, right? They don't want to text them right now, you can schedule text it. If you don't know how to use that function, just YouTube it or something.
Oh, I didn't know about that. That sounds cool.
I schedule to text you today, actually.
No way.
I remember at 3 a.m, oh shoot, I gotta. So
As in, you can auto schedule it, or you just make a note?
Yeah, you put it for like.
Are you gonna have to show me that?
You put it for like, you know, 10 a.m. or something where people are gonna be alive and awake.
Incredible.
And you say, yo, you want to meet up? That's it. Oh, it's been a while. Can we catch up? Just do that, and you see how like when you forget about this text, you know, a day or two from now, you are some like
you have to, the moment when
you're like, oh shoot, it came back.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a practice that one is simple. You already have in a habit that currently exists, and and it can come back to you in a ways that you're like, holy shit, I needed to have this conversation with this person.
Love that.
I'm glad I like scheduled it and got it out of my mind.
Yeah.
And now the relationship is moving forward.
I love that. That's such great advice. And I will say this project has actually been a proof positive of that advice, because I've been firing away hundreds of texts to so many people from all over the world that I really respect, admire, and want to be able to talk to. So I actually will offer a slight variation of what you said about it being hard. It's initially hard, but I'll tell you right now, I'm having fun. This is so fun to me.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm building a queue of dozens and dozens of these, and I think it's like probably the best thing. It's the most fun thing I could ever do in my career. I like tell my wife sometimes, I'm like, I'm living my dream. This is like,
dude. Investing in people is like pretty much the shit.
The best people I know are the people like you, and
Thank you.
all the recent conversations I've been having, and all my crew here with me today. So this is it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, crew, for listening to me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Terrific.